working inside out, and by that I mean I'm trying to fit the third window into what was the loft access doorway, um, and it's proving to be quite a pain in the backside. So I wasn't able to organise my trestles outside, and so it meant that I was going to work from the inside and try and do it that way. I got several issues with this particular opening. One, it's all in oak, so it's quite an awkward sort of wood. It doesn't chop away easily like a bit of pine wood, if you excuse the pun. Nothing is square on that opening at all. Nothing is plumb and nothing is square. And I'm talking left to right, top to bottom, and inside to outside. So you've actually got two separate lots of lintels on the top area, and so a slight gap in between where you've got bits of flint and stuff. You've got two separate lots of beams inside and outside that support the lintel and sit on the sill at the bottom there. The sill's sort of one piece, but it's smaller, obviously, than the width of than the opening. It only needed to be X amount of size, perhaps 7 or 8 inches or about 20 centimetres, so it didn't need to be any bigger than that. Whereas the actual opening is nearer 15, 16 inches, so about 40 centimetres. And when I was looking at sort of pre-made windows, so off-the-shelf windows, I came across one which was quoted as being 135 centimetres high by 80 centimetres wide, 4 foot something high, about 4'6" high, we'll say, and about 2'6" across, maybe a touch more than that. And so I thought, oh, all right, the window, the actual opening of this thing wasn't quite that. I think this was about 130 by 79 centimetres at its best. And so I thought, well, all right, it's near enough. I won't get anything exact. And I don't want anything smaller than the opening, because then it becomes a real pain, because I want it to be as wide as possible. Sadly, it's not sort of head height. It's not full. You can't sort of stand up there as such, but I mean, overall, as a window for the bedroom, it should work out all right. So I thought, okay, I'll buy that. I'll get that. So it's arrived, and actually, when you look at it, or when you measure it, it's actually 138 centimetres high and 70 or 85 centimetres wide. So that's just compounded the problem considerably, because it means, because the uprights here aren't plumb, so they're not, if you put a spirit level on it, the spirit level is just falling away. It means that you need to try and work out what part of it needs chopping and what part of it doesn't need touching. So on the side I'm working on there, it's kind of the bottom half that needs the most amount of work chopping out, to try and make it a little bit more plumb than it currently is. And then on the opposite side, you need to do the same on the top half section, because it's the top half that's sort of falling in. So if you can imagine, if you're looking at it now, it's leaning ever so slightly to the right. And because of that, then you kind of discount the bottom right-hand side, and you need to trim up the top right-hand side, and on the left-hand side, you need to do the opposite. And then I'm thinking, well, even with that, so while I'm merrily sort of chiseling away, trying my best at hacking it down a wee bit, and this stuff is like concrete, believe it or not. I mean, it's so tough, and it's in between a cob wall as well and a flint wall, so it's very, you can't get anything sort of too mechanical in there to chop it out. I'm thinking, well, all right, even if I make the width, if I can get the width to 85 centimetres, it's still going to be a nightmare. It's still going to be very, very difficult trying to get the head height, where even if you try and chop out the entire bottom sill, you're still going to need to chop out some of the top sill as well, some of the lintel on top there. and obviously you can see it is in two sections. It may be in the picture, maybe it looks like it's one, but it's actually two sections there. So it would mean that chopping the front section out to a degree, maybe all of it, just so I can square in the frame and then look to sort out something of a lintel later on at a later stage, because there's not vast amounts of stonework above, because the roof, this sort of the roof is pitching down there, you can see. But even so, it just proved to be a real nightmare of a job, and it's sort of late on in the afternoon, so I'm already flagging anyway, and then deciding you've got to crack on with a hammer and chisel to try and slowly take this stuff, because you can't even take it out in great chunks. It's so tough. It's so old and it's so tough. You'd think, my God, 150 years worth of timber, you can almost sort of pull it apart, but this stuff you can't. It really is like playing around with concrete. So fun and games with that, and then trying to work out what I'm going to do eventually with getting the window in place, and then obviously then I need to consider what I would do with regard to framing it afterwards, because obviously the frame is going to be well out once the window is in. That current surround is going to look way out of place, because it's pissed as a pudding, as we would say in the northwest of England. And so I'm going to have to try and make some sort of frame anyway to hide that, and then obviously that frame would work because I would be able to do some sort of render, sort of lime render, to meet it, and then everything should then start to tie in and look like it was kind of always there. Although obviously, clearly, in the 1880s they wouldn't have had uPVC windows in the loft area, and this area had been covered in ivy. You can still see some traces of it on the right hand side there. The vast 99% of it's gone, and the door itself was kind of hanging off when I first, the door that you can't kind of see because it's open at the moment, so it's at its thinnest profile. That when I bought it, the door was sort of hanging off, but I didn't think of coming with a ladder. I assumed I was buying a house, and I assumed that there would be a staircase or whatever. And when I got here, obviously there wasn't one. It was literally just sort of downstairs, and the only access to the upstairs was this loft access here, this oak door or panel. So I didn't actually get to see the inside of the loft, and I didn't realise just how big it was until I actually finally bought the place. And the first time I sort of bought a telescopic ladder and brought it on site and climbed up, and was amazed by what sort of a space there was in there. So it's allowed me to put in the 3 bedrooms and a showroom. So there's me putting the level on there, trying to see where we're at level wise, and then hoping by magic that somehow it will just create the opening that I wanted it to be. And obviously it's not going to do that, because this is not a fairy tale. This is real life. This is real life renovating, and there's times when it's just so difficult to try and work your way around things. I mean, by comparison, the downstairs window where I ended up taking the grinder to it to open up that was like a doddle. That was like child's play, because it was the ceramic blocks anyway, so they cut like a knife through butter, and it wasn't too difficult to take the sill off, get the window in place, foam it up, bolt it into place, and then afterwards redo the sill. And obviously the render still needs doing on it, but by comparison, it really was child's play, and this is just a nightmare. Then I'm considering, could I cut the window down a wee bit to try and accommodate it into the space? But there's no way you really can do that. It's fairly thin sort of profile anyway to the window, and I just don't think it wouldn't take that. With the old style wooden windows, you could back in the day you could trim a good sort of a centimetre or two off all the way around if you needed to, but those days long gone. So all these things are sort of floating through my head as I'm merrily chopping through. So I've decided I'm going to bring up the mini chainsaw and cut the beam in sort of sections, going through it maybe about 2 or 3 centimeters or an inch or so, so that it might make it a wee bit easier. By this time, my knees are aching. I've got sort of a dodgy right knee anyway, and then because you can't stand up in this space because you're within the opening area, it's a matter of sort of kneeling down on either on both knees or one knee, and then cracking on with the hammer and chisel. So it did work a little bit easier once I'd used the chainsaw just to cut it into sections. But I'm literally just hacking away at this thing, desperately hoping that it's all gonna fall into place. Um, Watching the clock as well, because like I said, it was sort of late. It was sort of early evening, late afternoon, early evening, and I needed to be getting back to the Airbnb, get myself sort of tidied up and showered and everything else, and fed as well. I was hungry at this stage, so everything was working against me at this. So I said you do get days like these occasionally, and you just have to. What I do is just try and go into automatic pilot mode, where you just almost sort of switch off and crack on with it. So I'm I'm busy trying to chop it away, and in my head, I'm just trying to work out solutions. I'm trying not to think too much about um, what the end result will be, just how I can get it to be more or less what it needs to be as far as the size of the opening is concerned. From a window that's been touted as being 135 centimetres by 80 centimetres, and actually turns up being 138 centimetres by 85 centimetres. And okay, it doesn't sound a great deal. You're talking about 8 centimetres, which is what, less than 3 inches, or 3 inches and a bit, and 5 centimetres the other way, which is 2 inches. But it's a heck of a lot when you're dealing with a chunky old piece of thick oak beam that doesn't want to be cut, which has stood the test of time and is like saying, no, you can try your hardest, try your darndest, but you're not going to break me. I'm going to remain in place here for another century and a half. So it's man against nature here, trying to do my best to cut it. And then I'm thinking I'll need to obviously try and cut the windowsill down to see if it'll sit in. But I can't go too far down on the windowsill because obviously the window opens and it's on hinges. So you obviously need to leave X amount of space for when the window's in place that it will actually swing open and shut. Less of an issue on the top because the where the hinges are there, because this is like a tilt and an open type window. You've got a hinge that sits quite low on the frame at the bottom, not so on the top. So here I am. So you can see I'm making a right old mess of the timber. But as you can see, the timber, it clearly isn't plumb. It is just falling into the. So I don't know whether it was put in that fashion or whether it's just moved over a period of decades and just settled into position. Because I think this was part of the add-on. I'm presuming this was part of the add-on from after the original house was changed and had the rear area put. There's sort of the rear section, because if you were to look inside, the original A-frame is still in place in the house, but then they've added an addition, other bits on more large beams to make the A-frame slightly wider, which takes the rear roof and makes it much longer than the front roof. And where this opening is positioned, possibly it was the original, but then they've just rejigged it and moved it about to maybe it was slightly lower down at one time. I don't know, or maybe not. And they've moved it once they've rejigged the roof. So I've got a feeling the opening has always been that particular timber. It just has an air of being very very old to it. The door I think has been replaced, and the door was pretty knackered anyway. When you look at it, the half section had gone, and the hinge had dropped off, had fallen off as well. So it was sitting on one hinge, and I just sort of did my Heath Robinson special on it just to get it so that it would remain in position for another couple of months until I got around to doing what I'm doing now. And I normally just close it up of an evening with a screw in the bottom, just to sort of keep it in place so the wind doesn't catch it. And it's a fairly safe neighbourhood anyway, so nobody's going to be looking to sort of break in anytime soon. So it'd be nice to eventually get this sorted and get the window in, and then I can see what it looks like. And the whole gable end looks fairly poor, to be honest with you. I mean, it's solid. It's 18 inches thick, so it's about 45 centimetres thick. So it's a big old chunk of gable. But because it's partially in stone, partially in flint, partially in cob, it just needs something that will tidy it up overall, because obviously it's quite an important part of the house. The front of the house has been rendered, and that's all right. Just needs repainting in real terms. But the side and the rear will need some sort of render. Need to get off the last of the ivy there, and then get something half decent on it. Maybe do a bit where you've got bits of stone visible, sort of sections of stone. I don't know whether that's a bit quiche or not to do. I haven't given it a vast amounts of thought at the moment. I know something needs doing. It would be nice to bring it all in stonework, but that would be that would take a long time, and it would cost a fortune. And I'm more than happy with the carb. I mean, the thickness of it, it's got great insulating qualities anyway, and obviously it stood 150 years anyway, so it's not going anywhere. So that's my thoughts on that. Anyway, as they say in all the greatest dramas, to be continued. So we're not at the end of this yet. This was such a drawn out process, and I felt it probably needed more than just a basic video to let you understand the complexities of it. So I hope you've enjoyed this, and I hope you'll return to see hopefully the concluding video on getting this darned window in place. Thanks for watching, liking, and subscribing, and I'll see you on the next video.